Today's Welcome to Tunga Dev Hour, and just like the previous webinar, this time around we are also diving deep into technologies. And for now, we are looking at building for cross-platform, Flutter versus React Native, and all other variants of similar frameworks. With me, next slide, please. With me, I have one of our very good developers, Daniel Benin. He is a full stack developer. I'm going to give him only 15 seconds to introduce himself. Then we shall continue from there. Daniel?
Okay, so my name is Daniel Benin. I'm a full stack engineer. I've worked with cross-platform for 4 years now. Currently working actively with React Native, and Node.js. Thank you.
All right, thank you. He's not mentioning this, but he works at Ghana Tech Labs, am I right?
Yeah, Ghana Tech Lab.
Cool. All right. My name is Roger Kawesa, talent manager at Tunga, and we are rolling it out today, and we can start deep diving in. But before we can begin, I'll begin with a few what we're going to talk about in the agenda. For starters, we're going to talk about what cross-platform is. Daniel will explain exactly what is what we expect when we are working with platform frameworks. He will talk about the value statement, where we talk about cross-platform and parallel evolution, how it evolved throughout the years until lately, the recent times, sorry. We are going to talk about native versus cross-platform. How do they differ? Which one is, at the end of the day, we want you to come out asking yourself some questions, which you'll also be free to ask us at some point. So the questions are supposed to be, which one can I use? Can I go for native? Can I go for a cross-platform? Why should I go for one or the other? So that's where Daniel will come in, and he'll be able to give us a distinguish between the two of these. Luckily enough, we have a demo for you, and Daniel will take us through this 3-minute demo and show to us exactly why native or why cross-platform is better than the other. You'll be the judge. And after the demo, we shall be diving into which cross-platform mobile development tool is better. I know we are using different tools at some point, but maybe you may be using tools which are maybe outdated, tools which are not efficient enough or making you more productive as you're doing your coding. So we shall also dive into that. It's always good to look at trade-offs. What are the bad things for one technology? Why we have to against the other technology? Why should I choose React Native? Why should I choose or any other cross-platform? We shall also give you examples of companies and what the different software companies, for example, Facebook, Uber, and et cetera, how they're rolling out their software in which languages. Finally, we shall have time for questions for the panelists. Please use the Q&A section to send in your questions. However stupid you think the question can be, please feel free to drop it there. We have enough time for that. That's part of our housekeeping rules that I'm giving you right now. Any Q&A goes there. I think that's it. Can we kick off right now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, Daniel.
Okay. Look at what platform development is. Now, for starters,
Daniel,
we have native development.
your network, please. Kind of.
Okay, is it better now?
Not yet. A little bit. You're sounding robotic at some point, so try and work on that. All right, as Daniel comes back,
Okay.
I forgot to mention that we shall be doing polls each and every. We have 3 segments of this whole presentation, and we shall be doing polls. You are required to, or you're urged to participate in the polls and give us your view of what you think, what the correct answer could be, and I'm sure Daniel will be able to explain further. Daniel, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Is it better now?
Yeah, that is better. Please, can go ahead.
Okay. we'll start looking at what cross-platform app development is. Now, when we talk about cross-platform app development, we are talking about developing software applications specifically for mobile operating systems that would work, that is one code base that would target uh, both mobile operating systems. Now, when we talk about mobile operating systems, we have very two popular ones. We have Android and we have iOS. We have others, but these are the two most popular ones that we have. So with cross-platform development, we're talking about developing or using one code base that would target these two. Going native, the fact that native is a bit expensive and also time consuming. Now, when you want to develop an app with native, iOS require the language that they need for their development, and Android also require the language that they need for their development. So when you want to develop Android, you have to go with Java, and with iOS, you have to go with Swift or Objective-C. So what cross-platform sought to do was to use one code base to target these platforms. And we have some benefits of using cross-platform. You can see there's less coding required, and it's also very budget friendly because you don't have to pay for both an iOS and Android developer. You can use the same UX, there's more feedback, and there's also a much larger user base. Next slide. Okay, so over the years, we've had some evolution of cross-platform. The problem of we having to develop separately for Android and separately for iOS. So over the years, some cross-platform tools have come up. We have in 2009, we had PhoneGap, also called Apache Cordova. Now, this was a cross-platform application or a cross-platform tool that helped you develop both for Android and iOS. But with Apache Cordova, we call these types hybrid apps. Now, they are called hybrid apps because they use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And there's a native wrapper that makes these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript look more native. So these apps were working in a web view. So they were just using native wrappers around it. It was just using a normal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in 2016, we had Ionic, and in 2011, we had Xamarin. Xamarin was released by Microsoft, and Xamarin uses C# and ASP.NET. So probably you do backend with C# and you want to move to cross-platform development. Xamarin is the best option if you're coming to C#.
So are you trying to say, Daniel, are you trying to say Xamarin would be better than someone using React Native?
Oh, not necessarily Xamarin will be better than someone using React Native, but let's say you have a mobile app project and then you are more familiar with C#, right? Xamarin can do the job just like React Native can also do the job. So not that React Native or Xamarin is better, but then depending on where you are coming from and depending on the language you are very familiar with, you can go with Xamarin or you can go with React Native.
Right, cool. So basically, but what's the adoption of Xamarin so far? Are we seeing developers going in for Xamarin, or it's not yet there yet, according to the stats, if you have a rough idea?
Xamarin has been around for some time now, but then the adoption was very, very poor compared to React Native and Flutter, and even Ionic. So I'll say comparing Xamarin, React Native, Flutter, and Ionic, Xamarin had a very poor adoption.
I think the popularity, the usage, companies like Facebook taking on React Native has made that framework more, at least a little bit popular as well.
Popular, yeah.
Maybe right, yeah. Okay, cool. That's good. All right. Anything you want to add on before we go to our first poll?
Okay, so 2015 and 2018, we had React Native and Flutter, respectively. React Native is backed heavily by Facebook, and Flutter is the new kid on the block, which is also from Google and uses that programming. You can go ahead.
All right. Reminder, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section there in case you have anything to ask. Again, don't be worried. However stupid may you think the question could be, nothing is always silly. So please feel free to drop a question there. So we go to our first poll and we're asking, is cross-platform mobile app development a replacement for native Android and iOS? Feel free to make your vote there. And I think the poll is up now. I repeat, is cross-platform mobile app development a replacement for native Android and iOS? Why do you think it is? You may think it's true, you may think it's false, and it's also not. But you can say you don't know. I mean, it's no crime not to know. All right, I can see so far we have 11 people out of the people who have voted. Um, Feel free to vote. They can even say you don't know. I mean, that's why we're here. Can you see the poll on your end, Daniel? The results so far?
I can.
Okay, cool. We shall end it soon. Hold on. Give it a few seconds. Yep, we're at a sweet spot. The poll has been closed, and the results are interesting. We are having a 50-50 tie. 50% of the people who are attending think that cross-platform or mobile app development will be a replacement for native app and Android development, while others are saying no, it's not true. If I'm to pick your pick your um, on your some advice from you, what do you think, Daniel, based on the results?
Well, I think this is false because comparing the two, even though cross-platform is good, cross-platform can never be a replacement for native Android and iOS. So that is my.
But why? Because I think it comes from the idea that it wants to make people, developers, work easier to develop based using one platform and not going to each and every native Android or iOS separate development. Why would you say it's false? For me,
Okay, so
I
the
would go ahead. Sorry.
continue your question.
No, for me, I would think that if cross platform is made beta at one point, we can envision a world whereby a developer doesn't have to is comfortable, whether a gaming developer or whatever kind of developer you are just using one framework or one tool to do everything for Android and iOS or any other future OS that will come in. I hear Huawei has its new OS for mobile coming up soon. Is it? I forget the name of the OS. But anyway, you were saying something before we continue.
Yeah, I was saying. So the problem that cross-platform tools are trying to solve, they are improving at solving that solution. But there's cost to it,
Sorry,
right?
come
And
again.
the cost
Sorry, come
is
again. So your network
okay.
went
I'm
off.
saying the problem that cross-platform tools seek to solve, they are becoming better at solving that problem, but then there's a cost to it, and the cost is performance.
Cost is what?
So performance.
Performance. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. That is a pretty high cost to pay. All right, let's continue with the next segment of the Dev Hour. Please take it on, Daniel.
Okay, so comparing native to cross-platform development, there are a lot of, should I say, benchmarks.
Sorry, Daniel. Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Let me
Roger,
give
I'm
you a
here.
minute. Yeah, I'm giving you a minute. Kindly reset your network and log back in. Don't you think so? Because we can hardly hear you at some of your points.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right. As we wait for Daniel, let me see if we have any questions in Q&A. Please don't forget to leave your questions in Q&A. We could have a comment as well. Feel free to make a comment. It's always good. We shall also be airing it out at some point. Um, as we wait for Daniel to join back in. Looks like people on the iPad are not able to vote. Coming up with a poll. So I can see your comment. You're using an iPad, you're not able to vote. Let's wait for the next poll and you give us your feedback. Maybe it could be something with the network or something. Daniel, are you back, Daniel?
I'm back. I'm back. Is it
All right,
better
cool.
now?
Just it's better now. You don't use to use your video, just use your audio to save some bandwidth. It's okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right, cool. Please continue.
Okay. So when we are comparing native to cross-platform, we have a few examples of cross-platform. We have React Native, we have Xamarin, we have Flutter. So when comparing these two, native and cross-platform, there are some benchmarks that we look at, and one of them is performance. So performance, comparing these two, performance is a factor in comparing these two. One is also resilience and reliability. How reliable apps built with native are compared to that built with cross-platform. Then we can also look at the design. When I talk about design, we talk about the user interface and the user experience. We can also look at the developer productivity. Now, how productive, how efficient is the developer when the developer is using cross-platform tools compared to when the developer is using native tools. And the last we can also look at are the libraries these two have access to and the libraries that are out for these two. So these are 5 benchmarks that we can look at that we can look at when comparing these two.
All right. Before you continue, can you expound on performance, please?
Okay.
Because in which way is a native? What's the performance of native and cross-platform? Give us a little sneak peek.
Okay. So normally the native apps are very performant compared to cross-platform because native apps are able to interact with the device hardware directly. Now let's say we have something like Android. Now you build Android with Java. This Android Java is able to interact with the device camera, the device storage. All these things are the interaction between these two is very intact. Now compared to something like React Native, you have to use libraries, right, to interact with this hardware parts, and these libraries are written by normal people. Now, the fact that there's a bridge in between the communication between the app and the native hardware causes a reduction in performance. So native apps are normally very performant compared to cross-platform.
All right, cool. All right, we can go ahead.
Okay, so there are some pros and cons for going with cross-platform. I mean, it's not always rosy if you choose to go with cross-platform. Now, let's say you're a mobile app developer, and you have an idea, or a company approaches you with an idea to build a mobile app. Now, this company has given you 2 months to hit the market with your mobile app, and they want to go both Android and both Android and iOS. They want to release for these two at the same time. Now, as a developer, it will be very, very good if you go with cross-platform because cross-platform has a very fast development time. And what do I mean by fast development time? Let's say this same company wants for iOS and for Android. Now, I have to hire someone who is well-versed in Java to handle the Android and someone who is well-versed in Swift to handle the iOS. Now, since these two are using 2 different code bases, it doesn't help or it doesn't ensure efficiency in building the mobile app. And also, there's also an increased cost because now 2 people are working on the app. I have one for Android, one for iOS. I have to pay more. The company will have to pay more, probably pay the Android developer equally and pay the Swift developer equally too. But with cross-platform, just one person with one code base can target both iOS and Android. So there is faster development and there's also the lower cost. And then for small team size, now we can have one person doing both iOS and Android in our team. We don't need 2 people for mobile app development. Just one person going with cross-platform is enough. And then with the cons, just like I spoke about, there's lower performance compared to the native because of the fact that the tools don't interact with the device hardware, and the interaction is a bit affected. And we can also talk about the issue with integration. Now, when we talk about integration, we can talk about hardware integration, dealing with storage, dealing with camera. These are all affected because of the third parties that you have to employ in using this, doing integration with these tools.
For the customer, I think it all comes down to cost, developer cost, and cost of tools, etc., and also the kind of app you're developing. And I think if you present to someone that, hey, I have a solution that is able to, I'm able to do this same application using one solution, which is cross-platform, I think that's why some of the clients will opt for cross-platform in terms of savings. That's my idea anyway. Yeah. All right. Cool. Thanks a lot.
True, yeah.
Cool. All right.
Okay. So now look at when to build with cross-platform and not native. Now, just like the example that I gave, you have a very small time to hit the market with your application. It's a very good opportunity. It's a very good time to start thinking about going with cross-platform, because with cross-platform, you'd have a single code base that can target both iOS and Android. That's the 2 popular mobile operating systems we have. And also with the scope of your work. Now, the scope of your projects. Now, cross-platforms are known to be very good with MVP products. Now, let's say you have a product, not too huge of a product, but a product, a nice idea, which can probably come out in 2 to 3 months. Cross-platforms are very good for such product because of the fast development that is involved. Now, let's say you are not really particular on your UI UX. You just want the functionality of the app. You don't really care about how it looks on iOS and how it looks on Android. You want to use the same UI for both. You don't really care. Now, that is also a good time to also go with cross-platform, because with cross-platform, since we are using a single code base, and we also use a single code base for the UI, the app on the Android is a bit similar in terms of UI UX to the iOS. So if you don't care about how they look on both iOS and Android, that functionality is your main goal with the app, then it's also a very good opportunity to go with cross-platform development.
I understand both platforms have design guidelines. I could be mistaken.
Yes.
Why would someone go in to make an app that looks similar? Because an iOS app on Android actually looks not right, if you ask me. Because they all have their own design guidelines, and why would one go in to do that if won't they be going against the design guidelines?
Okay, so depending on the cross-platform tool that you go with, since we are using the same tool, or the same tool for both that targets both iOS and Android, these tools are able to at least achieve close to the iOS UI. So you won't get the same. It's not like you get the same design on both Android and iOS, but the tools they try to at least achieve what the native UIs are, right? So, and for some users, it's functionality of the app is more important than how the app looks. Fine, the app can look very good, but they're not expecting too good UI. They just expect a good functionality.
Yeah, it's form of a function. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that. We are going to dive in. We are really on time on the demo. I know you have a demo for us.
Okay,
so,
I do. Yeah.
Perfect. Kick it off, please.
Okay, so this is an app that was built with Flutter. Now it's running in an iOS emulator on the left or right, and it's using that programming language. That programming language is also a programming language by Google. That is a programming language that we normally use to build Flutter. And you can notice the app is very fluid. The UI is very nice. This is the capability of Flutter. So with that programming language, you can structure our code. We have a more modular code in Flutter. Everything we have is a widget, and we also have the hot reloading feature in Flutter. I can edit my code, and immediately it's reflected on my UI. As you can see, I edited the login, and just after saving, it showed on the UI. That enables fast development, just like we said for cross-platform. And this is also an app built with React Native. Now, if you are familiar with React, you would know that this is in a way like React. This is JavaScript, and React Native uses kind of React-like structure. We have you build with components, you build with styles that are a bit similar to CSS. You have your package.json in there. You can also use popular web third parties like Axios, all in your application. Now, this is rendered in an Android emulator. There's an app written in React Native that is running fluid in an Android emulator. Now, it can also run in an iOS emulator. This is using what we call Expo. So Expo helps you in running your applications. Expo helps you in running your application. So here I actually after running in Android, I want to show you a demo of the same application that is also running in iOS. So I start with my Expo npm run iOS. If you are familiar with React, you know npm. Now when I start my iOS, it opens a web page for me, and this web page I can choose where I want to run my app, whether I want to run it in an iOS or an Android. So selecting iOS, it opens the Expo client in the iOS emulator. The Expo client is something like an app that renders your app. Now you can see the bundling JavaScript there. Now React Native, just like React, also uses Webpack behind the scenes. If you are familiar with React or npm, you would be familiar with Webpack. Now Webpack will take all the code that you have and bundle it into one. So all your codes are put into one file, let me say, and it's very efficient that way. So as you can see, it's bundling JavaScript files all into one. And after bundling, it would just run on our Android emulator. It probably takes a while to bundle when it's the first time, but after that, subsequent builds are normally faster. So this is the app again running in iOS. First, we run the app in Android emulator. Now we have the same, you can see it's the same loop that is running in iOS. So that is Flutter, and that is React Native running in emulators.
Okay. Cool, perfect. Can we go through the tools that people could use maybe to achieve this?
Okay, so for Flutter, you can go with Android Studio. Android Studio is very well suited for Flutter development. It's also, we use Android Studio for native development, but now it's more suited for both native and cross-platform. So you can go with Android Studio. You can also go with VS Code. VS Code is also enhanced to build Flutter applications. You can also go with IntelliJ. And so these are the three. You can go with Android Studio, IntelliJ, or VS Code. And for React Native, you can go with VS Code, and you can also go with, I think, WebStorm. Good. You can go with WebStorm. Right? Both IntelliJ and WebStorm are by JetBrains. So these two tools are very good for these developments.
If you had a client right now and they told you they want to build, they want you to choose an IDE to use for React, which one would you recommend?
I would recommend VS Code, because VS Code is very lightweight and it makes development a breeze. I've been using VS Code for 4 years now, and it's what I use for my React Native, even Flutter and React applications. So I'll go with VS Code.
Cool, perfect. That's pretty interesting. Can we go in for our other next demo, or we still not the demo like Paul? I think yes, Paul. Okay, cool, perfect. All right. So our next poll for all our attendees, we're asking: is Flutter the best cross-platform development tool? We have three options. Say one says yes because the layered architecture lets you control every pixel on the screen and thus making customization very simple. Second option is a no. It's not mature enough to handle large and deeply rooted mobile apps. And the third option is I don't know. Can we roll out this poll, please? People to vote. Perfect. I repeat, the question is asking, is Flutter the best cross-platform development tool? First option is yes. The layered architecture lets you control every pixel on the screen and thus making customization very simple. And no, it's not mature enough to handle large and deeply rooted mobile apps. The third option is I don't know. Actually, I prefer people who say I don't know because when you say I don't know, when you say I don't know, you get to learn. Honestly, I like people who say, "Oh no, you know what, Roger? I have no freaking idea." There is someone gets to learn, and they get to be told. But as we were saying before, this is a conversation that has been going on within the industry. Can developers go for cross-platform? Can they go for Flutter? And I know in our Q&A questions or question, we shall come up and see people asking, okay, I've listened to everything you've said, but I'm still confused. That is normal. We won't, you won't be judged or anything. All right, now our poll is done and 64% are saying no. Cross-platform is not mature enough. They rather stay with their native Android and iOS frameworks. They don't want anything to do with cross-platform. 18% are saying yes because they feel for the reasons that they give, and I like that the 18% saying no. So what do you think, Daniel?
Roger, I would probably go with the 18% saying I don't know. And I'm
You
saying
see, why?
I have a reason for going with I don't know because depending on the scope and the type of app that you are building, Flutter
Hmm.
might be the best cross-platform tool to use. Now, let's say I'm building an application that doesn't really require hardware interactions or integrations. Now, Flutter is the best tool to go for because it would because of the UI, the fact that you can customize the UI to every pixel. It focuses more on a very good UI UX. But when I'm building an application that has needs to go with the hardware back to back, I won't go with Flutter. So for this, I'll say I don't know because depending on the scope of work and the type of app that I'm building, Flutter
Hmm.
might be the best or the worst.
Okay, that's interesting. And those who are saying yes, do you know why? Uh, if you put yourself in their shoes, why would you think someone would, apart from the reason given anyway? Um,
Okay, so why would you want to go with Flutter? Now you might say you want to go with Flutter because now there's a lot of comparison between Flutter and React Native. These are the two most popular ones on the market now, and
mhm,
now it's come up that Flutter is more performant than React Native. So you might say yes, other than the fact that you can customize the UI how you like it. You might go with Flutter because Flutter is more performant a bit than
mhm.
React Native, and also because of the popularity. Now, Flutter has more GitHub stars than React Native. So Flutter is gaining popularity very, very fast. So that might influence your decision for saying yes.
Have you come across or have you worked on a project where customer or clients are changing their code base from one framework to another, maybe from native to cross-platform or the other way around, or not
No,
yet?
not really. But there's this case that I know that if you've heard of Airbnb,
Mhm.
so Airbnb did their app in React Native, and after a while, they had to rewrite their app back to native. And they said because their app had to go with more hardware interactions, they had
Mhm.
to rewrite it back to React Native. But knowing a customer or a client who has the app in native, I don't know anyone who would have in native and want to rewrite to cross-platform.
Okay. The other way around is a bit tricky. All right.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. So basically, for me, the results that we saw made perfect sense. I went with I don't know because with the reasons you gave, it really makes sense. It depends on the project and exactly you have to first look at what do I want to do before you can dive in and say, okay, let me go for cross-platform, let me go for native apps. All right, I think that is where that's our next topic right now. When to choose React Native. Can we start that right now? Thank you.
Okay, so when to choose React Native? Now, let's say I'm a web developer. Now, as a web developer, I need to know my HTML, I need to know my CSS, I need to be well versed in JavaScript. And let's say I'm more familiar with React, I'm more familiar with Angular or Vue. Now, if I'm porting to if I'm porting to mobile app development, the best option to go for is React Native, because React Native uses JavaScript or TypeScript under the hood, and I'm already familiar with this language. So I don't need to go and spend time learning any other language. I can just use the language I know for my web development, and I use the same language or this same framework for my mobile app development. So that might influence the decision to go React Native. Another influence is the community support. Now, React Native has been in the system for quite a while now, and it has a very good community support. Now, with development, we normally have hitches or bugs or issues when we are developing apps, software application, desktop app. Now, we normally visit Stack Overflow a lot. I, for one, go to Stack Overflow a lot. Now, you would want to find a problem. You have a problem, you want to find a solution online. Now, a React Native, because of its maturity, there's a high probability that the problem you are facing, someone has faced it and has found a solution and has put that solution online. So the community support makes it a bit easier to develop when you have blockades or bugs or issues in your development. And also have the documentation. Looking at the documentation, it's by Facebook, and Facebook doesn't play with their documentation. So looking at the React Native documentation, React Native has a very good documentation, talking about architecture to third-party frameworks like Redux and Flux that you can employ for state management. And you might also go with React Native if you are more in tune with modular programming. Now, I mean modular programming in the sense that you want to build your applications in terms of modules. Now, just like if you are familiar with React, React goes with more components. In React, you build components, and these are reusable pieces of code. Now, React Native also goes with this same modular architecture. So you want to build code in a modular architecture that is very easy to update and very easy to upgrade. You go with the React Native as a very modular architecture, and it can also influence your decision to go React Native.
All right, cool. Next. We can go look at this architecture maybe, and we understand it deeply.
Okay, so we have with React Native, we normally have two sides. Now we have the JavaScript layer and we have the native layer. Now the native layer is shown with the platform here. We can see these are all native services. The location is a device service. Bluetooth is a device service. The audio, sensor, camera, these are all device service. And we have your JavaScript, the JavaScript side, that we have the JavaScript layer, that's the JavaScript code that you write. Now, in between this, there's something very important that makes React Native possible, and that is what we call the JavaScript bridge. Now, it's the JavaScript bridge that enables the native component to be able to talk to the JavaScript side. So if, let's say you have a React Native application on your mobile app, you start it, and there's a main thread that is spun up. Now, this main thread also spins up a shadow thread and also a UI thread. These threads are able to communicate with the device and the device services through the JavaScript bridge. So with the architecture, the JavaScript bridge that makes React Native, let me say, tick, because the code that you write in React is it's passed directly through the JavaScript bridge, which enables the application to be able to, let me say, interact with services. So that is an overview of the architecture of React Native. We have the JavaScript bridge that responds to events from the native services, and that triggers your app or JavaScript code.
Okay, cool. Next.
Okay. Now, when to choose Flutter, we looked at when you would want to go with React Native.
Cross.
Now we are looking at when to go with Flutter. Now, just you might want to go with Flutter because of the scope of your project. Now, let's say I have a simple application. It's a very nice idea, but then it's a very simple application. There's no deep, it doesn't really interact with the native hardware or native services. Flutter is the best tool to go for in this with this opinion or with this idea, because the scope of my work my application won't really interact with the device services. And I want a very good UI with a very good performance. And with that, Flutter compared to React Native, Flutter is very good with performance compared to React Native. So if the scope of your project won't involve a lot of native services, you have to go with Flutter. And also for the fact that Flutter is more performant than React Native, because Flutter doesn't use any bridge. Flutter compiles directly to native code. So it makes this fast compared to React Native, and also the iterative and native oriented UI. Now with Flutter, we can customize our UI to the bare pixel, and we have a lot of options with UIs compared to Flutter. We have a lot of options with UIs talking about Flutter. So these three might influence your decision to go with Flutter. When you want a very good performance with a cross-platform, when you want a very customizable UI, and you have a scope or an app that won't really make deep interactions with native services.
If I say that I want to choose Flutter because on the front and back end I'll be using single code, will I be right?
You'll be using single code.
Yep. Will I
Yes,
be
you'll be
right?
right.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
you can
For me,
use
I think that's
that for server side. You can use that
another
for
strong reason as to why one could choose Flutter if I'm using the same code base or same code for both for the not.
basically use the same language. Let me put, because React Native, you use JavaScript for React Native, and you also have server-side JavaScript that is Node. So for both React Native and Flutter, you can both do front end and back end.
So which one has better support for most IDEs? Is it Flutter having more support, unlike React?
React has more support because React uses JavaScript, and we know JavaScript has been in the system for quite a very long time. So React using JavaScript has better support with IDEs.
I'm not support in terms of number of IDEs you can use.
Yes, supporting to a number of IDEs.
Okay, perfect. All right, cool. And this one you can, unlike the previous one in React, where you can where in cross-platform where you have to use the same theme or user interface. In Flutter, am I able to separate between Android and iOS?
Yes, with Flutter, you can choose to develop separately for iOS and separately for Android. So your code, Flutter has two layers that we have. We have the Material app. Now use the Material app when you want a more Android feel. And it also has a layer called Cappuccino. The Cappuccino is also for a more iOS feel. So with Flutter, you can actually build and it will look more iOS than Android. You can also build, it will look more Android than iOS, and you can also build for the two.
Right, cool, perfect. We can go to the next.
Okay, so just like I explained, Flutter uses what we call layers. In Flutter architecture uses more layers. Now on top we have the Material and Cappuccino, just like I explained. The Material uses more Android field, an Android field, and the Cappuccino uses more an iOS field. Now we have a saying in Flutter that in Flutter everything is a widget. Now everything that you write in Flutter is in quotes a widget. A widget is, let me say, something that can be compared to a component in React Native. And all the code that we write are compiled down to machine are compiled down to native code. So unlike React Native that we have a bridge, Flutter doesn't use any bridge in between. And the core engines are built with C++, and C++ is known to be very good with hardware interacting, that is low-level languages. So everything that we see on Flutter is compiled directly into native code. There's no bridge in between. We get to build with widgets, and it also has let me say frameworks or libraries like the Skia that is able to render low level. So all these things make Flutter in a way very performant and very good when it comes to UI UX compared to React Native. And also dealing with animations, Flutter is also very good with animations compared to React Native.
Perfect. Cool. So before we go to our next, just a quick reminder, in case you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section. We are almost approaching that section. So Daniel, right now, people have listened to you, they appreciate everything you've said, but we have maybe newbies in here. Could you give them examples of companies or famous apps that have been developed in cross-platform versus those developed in native? Next slide, please.
Okay, so these show applications that have been developed with React Native and applications that have also been developed with Flutter. Now, as I said, Flutter is a new kid on the block, so it's still gaining maturity, it's still gaining ground. So there are not a lot of companies that have tried or written their applications in Flutter. Compared to when you look at the React Native side, I'm sure you can recognize a lot of the icons there. These are all companies that have their apps in React Native. Now we have Facebook, we have Uber Eats, we have Wix, there's Pinterest, we have Salesforce, there's Instagram. Now these are all companies or applications that in one way or the other are using React Native for their mobile app. So let's say now you want to learn one framework that would land you a job very, very fast. Now, I would suggest you go with React Native, because the fact that React Native has been on the block, a lot of people have experimented React Native. There are a lot of apps in React Native, so people know and trust React Native more than they have more than they have in Flutter. Now, comparing Flutter, we have Google Ads. The Google Ads app is built with Flutter. We have eBay Motors. Their app is also built with Flutter. Hugh Phillips is also built with Flutter. These are apps that you can download and look at the feel, both React Native and Flutter.
Where does this leave Apple Swift?
Apple Swift. Okay, so there are some applications. For example, let me say Twitter. Yeah, these applications are built with Apple Swift. That is when you want to target more iOS than cross-platform. But you can actually find a lot of applications that are written in Apple Swift.
Yeah. But they're more inclined to Apple at this
Yeah,
stage.
more inclined to iOS.
Cool. All right. So I think we have come to a close of our dev hour. And please help us make the best conclusion ever before we can go to the Q&A. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section. Yes, Daniel, take it on.
Okay, so the best conclusion. So React Native and Flutter, comparing the two, these are, we've come a long way when it comes to cross-platform development. We have Xamarin, we have Ionic, there's Cordova. Now, these two are the ones that have been tested, and these two are the ones that are standing in terms of UI and performance, right? And depending on your opinion, or depending on the app that you are building, Flutter might be very good, or React Native might be very good. Now, let's say you're a mobile app developer, you don't have time to learn that programming language, because that is relatively, even though that is similar to JavaScript, it's relatively new. Now, it's very easy to go with React Native because you don't have to learn a new language. So with this makes React Native stands up, and also with maturity. And let's say you want a job, you stand more chance of getting a job with React Native than Flutter, since Flutter is the new kid in the block. But when you have an idea that you want a fast MVP, something that hits the market, something that is very attractive, Flutter is the best to go with. So depending on your scope of work, the performance and the UI, React Native might be the best, Flutter might be the best. But I, for one, if I'm developing, I would go with Flutter because of the UI and also the fact that it's very performant compared to React Native.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, Daniel. And we have come to the last segment of our Tunga Dev Hour. We have three questions so far. I think some may be a little bit repetitive, but before we go to that, can we do a final poll? If I forget that, can we have a last poll to discuss? All right, the final poll is: as a developer, will you choose Flutter over React Native, and why? After everything you've had, the first option, you can put the poll up now. React Native. You choose React Native because its native component gives you confidence that you are that with every iOS update, your app components will be instantly upgraded. Two, you choose Flutter because it is fast. It's fast development features. It has fast development features, and it's also expressive and has flexible UI. We can quickly complete this poll and we dive into Q&A. Flutter or React? And the Q&A also will also come back to the same thing. People will still be confused. Can I use this? Can I use that? Can you use this? Can you use that? All right, give you 30 more seconds after reading through again. After everything we've said, as a developer, would you choose Flutter over React Native? And remember, all this is subjective. As Daniel told you, he can land on the I don't know option still because he knows that it will depend on the project. But right now, supposing there's no I don't know option, what would you go for? Okay, let's close that down now. Can end the poll. 75% in the poll, yes, 75% of you feel that they will prefer using Flutter because they prefer fast development of features, and also it's expressive and has flexible UI. Daniel, what do you think?
I think with this, I'll go with the majority here because with the UI is very UI UX. Flutter carries the day when it comes to UI UX, and also the same Flutter compared to React Native also carries the day when it comes to performance. So I would go with the majority here.
All right, cool. That's pretty good. Remember, we began at 4 past, so I think we have 7 more minutes to go for our dev hour to conclude. So let's go to the final segment. We're going to go for Q&A. Daniel, thanks a lot for that. You finished your conclusion already. So let's go for the final Q&A. The first question is from, I'm not seeing my Q&A. How come? Okay, here we go. Would I like the English Flutter for my cross-platform? So let me know, is it better than React Native? I think this goes back to what we've been saying. Or isn't it the same thing?
Yeah.
Yep. So second question for anonymous attendee. For which kind of development Flutter is using? That's the question they're asking. I don't know how they wanted to frame it, but that's how it is. Which kind of development Flutter? Did you understand that question?
I'm sure he's asking if which kind of development will we go with Flutter. So probably let's say you have a mobile app that this mobile app doesn't need to talk to, let's say, use Bluetooth or camera extensively. You can go with Flutter with this because you won't really need to interact with the device services. Flutter is the best option to go with this. So apps that don't make heavy use of native services.
Cool. All right. The next one is from Vivian Nabulo. Thanks very much for the information between cross-platform and native apps. Thanks. Welcome, Vivian. What would you talk about the web progressive apps, or WPA, where you develop the web, then automatically converts into an app without coding? What do you think about WPAs?
Okay, so WPAs, as we know, they are progressive web apps. So these are apps that are built with HTML, CSS. There are normal web apps that we build, but then we use something called the service worker. And the service worker helps these apps to cache these assets so they can run offline. So using with PWAs, it's basically like the same website or web application, but then the resources that we have are cached in the sense that when we are offline, it serves us these resources that were cached, right? So PWAs come here. Let's say you have an application that you don't need really fast updates because if you are offline, PWAs will serve you stale data that has been cached. So you don't get to see recent updates with PWAs unless you come online. So once you're offline, you don't get to see recent updates. So for apps, you can also go with PWAs. They are also a nice idea. But for apps that you need instant updates, PWAs are a bad idea. But PWAs are also a very nice option to go with because they use service worker. They have what we call the background sync. You can send a
Offline
message.
use as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Okay.
So you
All
can
right,
send a
cool.
message
We have
once you
less
come
time,
offline. The message.
so 30 seconds to answer each and every question. Next is from Fezan Bati. Is it a good deal to start Flutter developing in Flutter instead of React Native for JavaScript and TypeScript developers? And also, which one has more career opportunities in the future? So I need some career guidance. All right. In case you've understood the question, you
Okay,
can.
so with the question in the future, it's actually based on opinion, but I think in the future, Flutter has a lot of career opportunities because of the rate of adoption of Flutter. Now, Flutter just came, and now we have more stars on GitHub than React Native, and more people are employing Flutter devs now because of the fact that the UI is more flexible, and also the fact that it might be more performance than React Native. So for future career options, Flutter might be the best, according to my opinion.
Okay, good. Next, quick one for Daniel. Which would you, this is from Victor Chris, which would you opt for in all resources, if all resources were at your disposal? Cross or, for your case, he's trying to ask you in your opinion, which one would you opt for if you had all the resources? That is enough time, enough funds, etc. with zero constraints. Which one would you opt for?
I'll go for cross-platform.
All right, cool. Next is from Vivian Nabulo. What language must I learn to use Flutter?
Flutter uses the Dart programming language.
All right, cool. Next is from the second last is from Damba Paul. What would be the comparison of native script to Flutter?
Native scripts uses JavaScript under the hood, so it's different. You can use native script. Native script is a bit similar to Ionic, but with that they use different programming languages.
Okay, cool. Finally, we have one from Simon Gang. I hope I pronounced your name right. Please, what is the learning curve for Flutter as compared to React Native? Learning curve. Wow, it's a good question.
That's very, very subjective. Now,
Yeah,
that
true.
it's a bit Google made that very similar to JavaScript. But I would say compared to React Native, comparing Flutter to React Native, I would say the learning curve for React is for the learning curve for Flutter, according to my opinion, is a bit lower than that of React Native.
True. As you said, it's very subjective.
Yeah.
Okay, we are done with we've come to the end of our Tunga Dev hour. We began at exactly the same time, previous hour. Thanks a lot, Daniel, Benin. I like your name, by the way, Benin. That's a very good name. That's a very good name for your time. I also want to thank my invisible panelists. I had Viola behind the scenes. I had Lynn behind the scenes. Thanks for the great work you've been doing. And also I want to thank all the attendees for attending this session. I see some familiar faces, people I've talked to previously. And I would love to call this Tunga Dev hour, call it to an end. Thanks, everyone, and have yourself a nice day.